The world, for a day trader, doesn't end with a bang or a whimper. It ends with a frozen pixel. One single, unmoving, mocking pixel right in the middle of a stock chart that was, until a moment ago, climbing a beautiful, near-vertical trajectory toward pay off the contractor in cash territory. "Come on, baby," I whispered, my voice a dry rasp in the dust-filled air of my would-be home office. My mouse cursor, a lone beacon of hope, hovered over the big, beautiful green cell button. Just another half a point. Just a little tick upwards and Daddy can afford the good soundproofing foam, not the stuff that looks like an egg carton that's been through a dishwasher. The stock was VTL, a volatile telecom outfit that was either going to revolutionize 6G or spontaneously combust into a penny stock by lunchtime. My gut, and 3 sleepless nights of research, told me it was about to spike and then dip. I was all in, riding the wave with the intention of jumping off right at the crest, leaving me with a tidy 5-figure profit for a morning's work. The ticker hovered. My heart was doing the cha-cha with my spleen. My finger tensed on the mouse button. And then the screen froze. The little green line stopped its majestic ascent. The numbers in the sell order box became static monuments to a dream. A little yellow triangle with an exclamation point appeared over the Wi-Fi icon in the corner of my screen. Limited connectivity. It's the modern equivalent of the Grim Reaper showing up at your door to tell you he's just here to use the bathroom. "No," I said, the word coming out small and weak. Then, with more feeling, "Oh, no, 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 no." I slammed my hand on the particle board desk that was serving as my temporary command center amidst the chaos of renovation. A small cloud of drywall dust poofed into the air, coating my monitor in a fine layer of construction site misery. For 10 seconds that stretched into an eternity, the world stood still. 10 seconds in the real world is nothing. In the world of day trading, it's enough time to go from millionaire to living in a van down by the river. Then, as suddenly as it vanished, the connection returned. The chart updated with a horrifying lurch. The wave hadn't just crested, it had crashed onto the shores of fiscal disappointment. I clicked sell, with the frantic energy of a man trying to unring a bell, the triumphant cha-ching I had envisioned replaced by the sad little plink of a missed opportunity. I hadn't lost money, not my initial investment anyway, but several $1,000s of pure profit had evaporated into the digital ether. "Sounds like you need a hard line," a gruff voice said from the doorway. I looked up to see Gus, my contractor, standing there with a nail gun in his hand, which he held with the casual authority of a gunslinger. He was in his 60s, with a magnificent walrus mustache that seemed to contain a universe of construction-based wisdom. He surveyed my pale, dust-covered face with a distinct lack of surprise. "The Wi-Fi," I croaked, gesturing at the screen. "It flickered." Gus grunted. It was a sound he had perfected, capable of conveying anything from "the load-bearing wall is secure" to "your choice of kitchen tile is an affront to God." This one was squarely in the "I told you so" category. "This Wi-Fi stuff," he said, waving his free hand dismissively. "It's just magic and wishes. Give me a copper wire any day. At least you can hit it with a hammer when it misbehaves." "Gus, in my world," I said, leaning back in my chair and rubbing my temples, "a solid Wi-Fi signal is the difference between affording that Italian marble for the bathroom you wanted and linoleum, with a picture of Italian marble printed on it." "I ain't installing no picture marble," he stated, his face grim. "We're running a dedicated line, armored fiber optic. You could survive a nuclear blast and still be able to watch your cat videos." He pointed with the nail gun towards the wall. "Problem is, to get a clean run to the main node, we gotta go outside and tap into the junction box. All the wiring for this whole development runs through a central hub." He gave a rare, dry smile. "1 box to rule them all." "Fine. Whatever it takes," I said. "I can't have that happen again." "Good," he grunted. "Now, if you'll excuse me, this wall won't frame itself." He disappeared, leaving me to stare at my diminished account balance. The suburbs. I'd moved here to the idyllic-sounding Oakwood Creek Estates for peace, quiet, and a rock-solid fiber optic connection the sales agent had bragged about. I'd gotten 2 out of 3, and the third was starting to feel like a matter of life and death. The next day, I got my first real taste of the local flavor. I was checking the mail, expecting a bill from Gus and a box of the ridiculously expensive coffee beans I impulse ordered online. Instead, I found a pristine, cream-colored envelope. It was thick, heavy, like a wedding invitation to a funeral. The return address simply had an embossed logo of an oak leaf and a flowing creek, the HOA. I opened it. The letter inside was a masterpiece of the form. "Dear Resident," it began, the font a self-important serif that probably had its own name. "It has come to our attention that a violation of Bylaw 7, Section 4, Subsection B2 regarding the timely concealment of refuse receptacles has occurred at your property. On the morning of July 2nd, your municipal waste container was observed to be visible from the street at 9:45 a.m., a full 45 minutes past the 9 a.m. deadline for post-collection storage." I had to read that sentence twice to fully appreciate its bureaucratic splendor. "While we trust this was a simple oversight, we must enforce the community standards that we all agreed to uphold for the preservation of our shared aesthetic and property values. A nominal fine of $25 has been assessed to your account. Prompt payment is appreciated." It was signed, in a flourish of looping cursive, by Brenda Kane, President, Oakwood Creek Estates Beautification and Compliance Committee. "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered, staring at the letter. "You got one, didn't you?" The voice was light and conspiratorial. I turned to see my next-door neighbor, Sharon, a harried-looking but friendly woman in her 40s, peering at me over the meticulously pruned hedge that separated our properties. She was holding a bright pink watering can and gesturing at the letter with it. "The trash can transgression?" she asked. "Is that what they call it?" "Oh yeah," she said, scurrying over to the property line. "I got one last month because my kid's big wheel was parked on the lawn for 2 hours. Brenda called it an unapproved recreational vehicle in a non-designated parking area." $25. She rolled her eyes. "Welcome to the neighborhood." "This is insane," I said, holding up the letter. "It's a garbage can." "You have no idea," Sharon said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "That's Brenda Kane. She runs this place like her own personal fiefdom. Her husband was on the board of the development company that built this place. When they handed it over to the residents, she staged a coup. Okay, not a coup, but she got all her friends on the board and voted herself president for life, basically." I must have looked as bewildered as I felt, because she leaned in closer. "Listen, you work from home, right? I see you on the computer all day." "Yeah, I'm a trader," I said. "The internet is important." Sharon's face clouded over. "Oh, honey, you need to know about the internet." And then, in hushed tones, she laid it all out. The developer, as a perk, had installed a powerful, commercial-grade wireless system for the whole community. It wasn't traditional cable or fiber to each house. It was a point-to-point microwave network, fast and reliable, and the cost was bundled into the HOA fee, which made it seem like a great deal. "But the whole system," she said, her eyes wide, "is managed by the HOA. And Brenda has the master password." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean she has the password?" "I mean she controls it," Sharon whispered. "She can see everything. Not like what you're looking at, I don't think. But she gets reports on data usage. She calls it maintaining digital hygiene. Last year, the Peterson kid in number 42 was apparently streaming too many video games, so she throttled his connection until his parents came and personally apologized at an HOA meeting. I stared at her, horrified. This was infinitely worse than the trash can. This was a threat to my very livelihood. "Just be careful," Sharon said, patting my arm sympathetically before retreating back to her petunias. "Don't get on her bad side." The warning came about 6 hours too late. Later that afternoon, a shadow fell over me as I was trying to wrestle a roll of sod onto a bare patch of lawn the construction had destroyed. I looked up to see a woman who could only be Brenda Kane. She was in her 50s, with a helmet of blonde hair that looked like it could deflect small arms fire, and she was holding a clipboard. She radiated an aura of crisp linen and quiet disappointment. "Quite the project you have going on here, Mr." Her voice was smooth, but with an edge like broken glass. "Leo," I said, wiping a muddy hand on my jeans. "And yes, just trying to make the place my own." "Of course," she said, her eyes scanning my yard, my house, the contractor's truck, taking in every detail and finding it wanting. "We just need to be mindful of how our personal projects impact the community's shared resources." She paused for effect. The noise, the dust, the bandwidth. She said that last word while looking directly at the window of my new office. The threat wasn't veiled. It was gift-wrapped and hand-delivered. She knew. She was connecting my disruptive construction with my internet usage, creating a narrative in her head where I was some kind of resource-leeching villain. I tried to be diplomatic. I gave her the charming smile that usually worked on difficult clients. "Well, a reliable connection is pretty essential for my work, so I'm sure we're on the same page about wanting to keep the community's resources in top shape." Brenda did not return the smile. Her lips thinned into a straight line. "We all have our work, Leo, but the most important work is maintaining the character of this community. Some things," she said, her gaze turning icy, "are more important than streaming." She made the word sound dirty, like something one did in a seedy, dark alley. Then, with a curt nod, she turned and continued her patrol, clipboard at the ready, leaving me standing in the mud with a profound sense of dread. The battle lines hadn't just been drawn. She'd already built fortifications on them. A few days later, Gus delivered the bad news. He was standing by the side of my house, pointing at a small, unassuming green metal box sitting on a perfectly manicured patch of grass between my property and Sharon's. "There she is," he said, with the grim reverence of a man identifying a grizzly bear. "The box of Pandora. To run your armored cable without tearing up the whole lawn, I gotta get in there." "Okay," I said, not seeing the problem. "So get in there." Gus shook his head slowly, his mustache drooping with despair. He unrolled a blueprint of the property survey. "According to this map, that 3-foot by 3-foot square of grass it sits on is not your property. It's officially designated HOA common ground." He looked at me. "That means it's owned by God and the HOA, and I ain't got God's cell number." I stared at the box, then at my house, then back at the box. "You're telling me I have to ask Brenda for permission to run a cable to my own house because it has to pass through the Bermuda Triangle of suburban landscaping?" "Yep," Gus said, already starting to pack up his tools for the day. "You gotta petition the board. Get it on the agenda for the next meeting. Good luck with that." And so my descent into madness began. I drafted a polite, formal request, complete with diagrams from Gus and a detailed explanation of why a hardline connection was necessary. I emailed it to the official HOA address and got an automated reply informing me that the next meeting was in 1 week, and my request had been added to the new business docket. The night of the meeting, I walked into the community clubhouse and was immediately hit by the soul-crushing atmosphere of forced civility. The air was thick with the smell of stale coffee and cheap air freshener. About 15 residents were scattered amongst the folding chairs, their faces a mixture of boredom and petty grievance. And at the head table, flanked by 2 other board members who looked like her loyal vassals, sat Queen Brenda. The meeting was a masterclass in absurdity. First, a 20-minute debate, complete with impassioned speeches, on whether the approved shade of beige for mailbox posts should be desert sand or gentle fawn. Then, a woman gave a tearful 5-minute presentation on the emotional toll of the neighborhood squirrels stealing her birdseed. Brenda listened to it all with the patience of a saint, making solemn notes on her clipboard. Finally, she called my name. Next, we have a request from Leo at Lot 22 regarding infrastructure modification. I stood up and presented my case. I was polite, concise, and professional. I explained the need for a stable connection for my job and how Gus's plan was the least disruptive way to achieve it. Brenda listened, a small, unreadable smile on her face. She didn't even glance at the diagrams I'd handed out. When I was finished, she looked out at the assembled residents. "Thank you, Leo," she said, her voice dripping with false sincerity. "However, this brings up a larger issue I feel we must address. Before we can approve any projects that may increase the strain on our shared digital infrastructure, I believe we need a thorough review." My stomach dropped. "I've received complaints," she continued, letting the word hang in the air, "that the internet has been sluggish lately. It seems unfair that some of us, who only use the connection for sending emails to our grandchildren or looking up recipes, are being penalized by the excessive data consumption of others." She looked directly at me. Every eye in the room followed her gaze. I was being publicly branded as a bandwidth hog. "Therefore," she announced with an air of grand authority, "I am forming a new subcommittee, the Digital Resource and Equity Task Force, to study this issue in depth. Until that task force can deliver its findings, which could take several months, all project requests related to network infrastructure are hereby indefinitely tabled." She slammed a small gavel on the table. It was a gavel she had clearly brought from home. Case closed. I stood there, speechless. It was a complete, unambiguous, and masterful shutdown. She had used the guise of bureaucratic fairness to slam the door in my face. I walked out of that clubhouse fuming, my carefully prepared diagrams feeling like worthless pieces of paper in my hand. The next morning, I was explaining the situation to Gus, who just nodded slowly, sipping his coffee. "So, we're screwed," I concluded. "Not screwed," Gus said, after a long, thoughtful sip. "Just inconvenienced." He looked over at the little green box, then back at me. "Tell you what, I'm not going to run the cable, but I am going to take a quick peek inside that box. Just see what we're dealing with, what parts I might need to order for when you eventually win your little war." My rebellious streak, freshly fertilized by Brenda's tyranny, flared up. "Yeah, okay, let's do it." Gus pulled a ring of keys from his belt that looked like it could open every lock in the continental United States. He selected a small, simple one, walked over to the box, and gently popped the panel open. There was no alarm, no siren, just the quiet click of a well-made hinge. He peered inside, humming thoughtfully. A curtain twitched in Brenda's window across the street. My internal alarm bells started screaming. "Gus, I think we're being watched." "Always are," he grunted, not looking up from the nest of wires inside the box. 30 seconds later, I heard the sound of a car approaching, moving too slowly to be a resident. A police cruiser. It pulled up to the curb, and 2 officers got out. One was young and looked like he took his job very seriously. The other was older, with a gut that strained the buttons of his uniform and an expression that said he was 2 weeks from retirement and had seen it all. Brenda was on her front porch now, phone clutched in her hand like a holy relic. "Officers! Thank goodness!" she called out, her voice filled with manufactured panic. "They're tampering with community property. I caught them red-handed. It's vandalism!" The younger officer, Miller, approached us cautiously. "Sir, can you step away from the utility box, please?" Gus closed the panel, straightened up, and looked at the officer with an expression of profound boredom. "Sure thing." The older officer, Davis, ambled over to Brenda's porch. "Ma'am, is anything broken?" he asked, his voice heavy with the weariness of 1,000 pointless calls. "They had it open!" Brenda shrieked, pointing at us with a trembling finger. "It's the principal! That is protected HOA property!" Davis sighed, a sound that seemed to draw all the joy from the immediate vicinity. He walked over to us. "This your house?" he asked me. "Yes, sir," I said calmly. "This is my contractor, Gus. We were just assessing the wiring for a future project." "A project that has not been approved!" Brenda yelled from her porch. Officer Davis ignored her. He looked at Gus. "You damage anything?" "Nope," Gus said. "Just looked." Davis nodded. He turned back towards Brenda. "Ma'am, this is a civil matter for your homeowners association. Nothing has been damaged. No crime has been committed. Please do not call 911 unless there is an actual emergency." He tipped his hat to us. "Have a nice day, gentlemen." He and Miller got back in their car and drove away, leaving a furious, sputtering Brenda on her porch. She had played her hand, calling in the cavalry, and they had effectively told her to stop wasting their time. Her authority had been publicly challenged and found wanting. She locked her eyes on me, and the look she gave me could have curdled milk from 50 paces. The war was no longer cold. It was on. The next week was a form of psychological torture. The internet throttling began. It wasn't a complete shutdown, but something far more insidious. My connection would drop for exactly 2 minutes at 9:30 a.m., right as the stock market opened. It would drop out again in the afternoon, always when I was 98% done uploading a large video file of one of my vintage tech restorations to my YouTube channel, forcing me to start the hour-long process all over again. It was too precise to be a coincidence. It was a digital shanking. She was sending a message. That's when I decided to stop being a victim and start being a professional. My old life was in IT security. I'd spent years telling corporations how to protect their networks. It was time to use those skills for my own benefit. I couldn't prove she was throttling me from my end, but I could investigate the system she was using. I poured a large mug of coffee and spent a long night digging. I found the service provider for the community network, then the technical specs of the commercial-grade wireless array they had installed on the clubhouse roof. I read through pages of mind-numbing jargon about transmission protocols and frequency bands. And then I found it. The golden ticket. The system was so powerful because it didn't operate on the standard 2.4 GHz or 5 GHz Wi-Fi bands that home routers use. To get the necessary power and penetration to cover 100 houses, it used a specific set of licensed radio frequencies, regulated by the Federal Communications Commission. My heart started beating faster. This was a whole different ballgame. A quick search of the FCC website brought me to the Holy Grail. Title 47, Section 15.5 of the U.S. Code of Federal Regulations. The language was dense, but the meaning was crystal clear. It is a federal offense to willfully or maliciously interfere with any radio communications of any station licensed or authorized under this chapter. The penalties weren't a slap on the wrist. They were severe. Fines starting in the tens of thousands and escalating into the hundreds of thousands, plus potential seizure of equipment, and even criminal charges. Brenda, in her infinite technological ignorance, thought she was just turning down the volume on the neighborhood's Wi-Fi. She had no idea she was messing with the federal government. I printed everything: the regulations, the technical specs of the network, my meticulously documented log of every single outage, complete with timestamps and screenshots. I had a file. A thick, beautiful, damning file. I now possessed a nuclear option. Just to be safe, I did one more thing. I quietly went online, using my phone's cellular data, of course, and ordered the most powerful, expensive satellite internet package available. The installation was scheduled for the end of the week. It was my insurance policy. I was no longer just playing defense. I was setting up a checkmate. The final escalation came in a menacing red envelope, hand-delivered and propped against my front door. Inside, on the same creamy, self-important paper as before, was Brenda's magnum opus. It was a final notice to cease and desist excessive bandwidth consumption. The letter was a symphony of pseudo-legal jargon and playground threats. I read it aloud to an unimpressed Gus, who was putting the finishing touches on my office bookshelf. "Be advised," I read, adopting a suitably pompous tone, "that your non-compliant data streaming activities represent a material breach of the community's shared resource covenant. You are hereby ordered to curtail said activities to a level commensurate with community standards. For clarity, this means light browse and email only." Gus snorted. "Is that even a thing? Commensurate with community standards? What?" "Oh, it gets better," I said, and continued reading. "Failure to comply will result in the immediate and indefinite suspension of your network privileges to protect the operational integrity of the system and ensure equitable access for all residents." I looked at Gus. He was just shaking his head. "She put her threat in writing," I said, a slow smile spreading across my face. "She actually signed her name to a confession." I folded the letter neatly and placed it on top of my evidence file, which was now a satisfying 2 inches thick. The final piece of the puzzle was in place. The big day was Friday. Gus had finished. The office was perfect. The dust was gone, replaced by the scent of fresh paint and new beginnings. The wiring was hidden, the lighting was soft, and my multi-monitor battle station was gleaming. To celebrate, I decided to do a live stream from my small but loyal YouTube following, a grand reveal of the Fortress of Solitude 2.0. The stream went live. People started pouring in, the chat scrolling with compliments. On my second monitor, tucked in the corner, I had my trading platform open. VTEL, the stock that had betrayed me weeks ago, was on the move again. This time, my research suggested a sustained rise based on a rumored merger. I put in a sizable buy order. It was a perfect day. My creative passion and my lucrative profession, all running in perfect harmony. "And as you can see," I said to my webcam, gesturing around the room, "we have full acoustic paneling, diffused backlighting, and thanks to my man Gus, every wire is hidden. This is the culmination of 3 months of dust and chaos, and it is glorious. My subscriber count was peaking, the chat was flying. The VTEL stock ticker turned a beautiful, vibrant shade of green and started climbing fast. I was on top of the world. And that's when Brenda pushed the big red button. My screens went blank. The Wi-Fi icon, my digital heartbeat, flatlined, replaced by the dreaded red X. Disconnected. I pulled out my phone. The house Wi-Fi was gone. Not limited. Gone. The network name had vanished from the list entirely. I switched to my phone's cellular data. A new email notification popped up. It had been sent to the entire HOA mailing list. From Brenda Kane, President at oakwoodcreekoa.com. Subject: a community digital detox. Body: dear residents. In an effort to promote community engagement and reduce our collective screen time, I have temporarily deactivated the community internet service for a 24-hour digital detox. I encourage you all to talk to your neighbors, read a book, or simply enjoy the silence. Service will be restored tomorrow. You're welcome. My YouTube chat, which I could still see on my phone, was a blur of question marks and messages of, "Leo, did you die?" My stock trade was locked in, completely blind, at the mercy of the market. My blood pressure should have been skyrocketing. I should have been furious. But I wasn't. I was calm. I was serene. I just smiled. She had done it. She had actually, literally done it. "Okay, Brenda," I whispered to the empty room. "Let's play." I opened my phone's contact list and scrolled to a number I had saved earlier that week under the name The Nuclear Option. I pressed the call button. A bored-sounding woman answered, "FCC Enforcement Bureau, how may I direct your call?" I was polite. I was concise. I was a man with a mountain of evidence. "Hello?" I said calmly. "I need to report a case of willful and malicious interference with a licensed commercial radio signal, currently in progress." There was a pause on the other end of the line. The boredom in the operator's voice was instantly replaced by sharp attention. "Go ahead, sir." I laid it all out. The name of the HOA, the specific type of network, the licensed frequencies it operated on. I explained that the president of the association had just shut down the entire network for a non-technical reason and had admitted to doing so in a written email to all residents. I offered to email my entire 2-inch file of documentation immediately. "Stay on the line, sir," the operator said. "I'm patching you through to the regional field office director." 2 minutes later, I was looking out my brand-new office window. The timeline was almost comically short. It was the most efficient government response I had ever witnessed. 2 sleek, black Ford sedans with discreet government plates cruised silently into our quiet suburban cul-de-sac. They didn't slow down in front of my house. They drove right past and parked directly in front of Brenda's, one behind the other, perfectly boxing in her pristine Lexus. 2 figures emerged, one from each car. They were men in their 40s, dressed in practical trousers and official-looking navy blue windbreakers. Emblazoned on the back and on the left breast, in stark, authoritative yellow letters, were 3 letters: FCC. They walked with a purpose that made a casual stroll look like a frantic sprint. They went up Brenda's perfectly swept walkway, ignoring the decorative gnome holding a welcome sign, and knocked on her door. It wasn't a polite tap. It was a firm, resonant knock that echoed in the sudden silence of the neighborhood. Brenda opened the door, a confused, slightly annoyed look on her face. She saw the men, saw the jackets. Her expression curdled from annoyance to indignation. I couldn't hear their words, but I didn't need to. I had a front-row seat, and, as it happened, a brand-new pair of high-powered, bird-watching binoculars I'd bought for the backyard. I raised them to my eyes. The scene snapped into perfect focus. One of the agents, let's call him Agent Smith, was speaking calmly. Brenda was not. She was gesturing wildly, pointing at her own house, then at the sky, then around the neighborhood, as if explaining her brilliant digital detox plan to a pair of toddlers. The agents, Smith and Jones, remained utterly impassive. Their faces were carved from bureaucratic granite. Brenda's tirade wound down. Agent Smith, unmoved, reached into the leather briefcase he was holding and pulled out a thick sheaf of papers. He handed them to her. Brenda snatched the papers from his hand. I zoomed in with the binoculars, focusing on the top page. Her face, already flushed with anger, went white. The color drained from it like water from a sink. I could read the header on the document, even from across the street. The letters were stark and official. Notice of apparent liability for forfeiture. And below that, a lot of legal text. But my eyes were drawn to the bottom of the page, to a single highlighted line item. I twisted the focus knob, my heart pounding with giddy excitement. The number was clear as day. It was beautiful. $250,000. Brenda swayed on her feet. She looked at the paper, then at the stone-faced agents. Then her eyes darted across the street and locked directly onto my window. Her face was a perfect mask of shock, horror, and dawning comprehension. She had finally, after a long and storied career of tormenting homeowners over lawn maintenance and trash can placement, encountered an authority greater than her own. She had picked a fight with the alphabet, and the alphabet had won. The aftermath was glorious. The internet was restored less than 30 minutes after the FCC agents arrived. They had, as I later learned from a gleeful Sharon, instructed the terrified HOA vice president, a meek man named Gerald, who was now sweating through his polo shirt, on how to reactivate the system immediately. The neighborhood, which had been plunged into an unwilling silence, erupted. First came the confused texts, then the dawning realization, then the jubilation. The story of the black cars, the FCC jackets, and Brenda's ashen face spread faster than any gigabit connection could carry it. Brenda became a pariah overnight. Her curtains were drawn, her car didn't move, and rumors began to circulate that she was putting her house on the market. An emergency HOA meeting was called that weekend by Sharon and a handful of other emboldened residents. It was the best-attended meeting in Oakwood Creek history. People stood in the back. In a swift, unanimous vote that took less than 5 minutes, Brenda Kane was impeached as president. Sharon was reluctantly nominated as her replacement, accepting only on the condition that her first official act would be to hire a professional, third-party management company and to pass a motion, effective immediately, dissolving the Beautification and Compliance Committee forever. The motion was met with a standing ovation. The next day, my satellite dish, my beautiful, unnecessary insurance policy, was installed on the roof. I now had my own private, untouchable 2-gigabit gateway to the world. Gus came by to pick up his final check. "Heard about the fireworks," he said, a genuine smile cracking his mustache. "You didn't tell me you had friends in high places." "They're not friends, Gus," I said, handing him the check. "They're just the people you call when someone messes with the magic and wishes." That evening, I sat in my perfect, quiet office and decided to make one last piece of content about my suburban saga. I filmed a simple video, telling the whole story from start to finish. I did dramatic readings of Brenda's letters. I explained the difference between regular Wi-Fi and licensed frequencies. I titled it, "How My HOA President Got Fined $250,000 by the FCC, a Cautionary Tale." I uploaded it, and the internet did its thing. The video exploded. It hit the front page of Reddit. It was retweeted by tech journalists and legal bloggers. It was dissected in online forums dedicated to tales of malicious compliance and pro-revenge. In 1 week, it earned more in ad revenue than I had lost on the VTEL trade that had started this whole mess. Now I sit here in my fortress of solitude. The lighting is perfect, my chair is ergonomic, and my internet connection is a thing of beauty. I'm editing a new video, a peaceful restoration of a 1980s boombox. An email notification dings softly. It's from the new HOA management company. The subject line reads, "Reminder, friendly community BBQ this Saturday, all welcome." I take a sip from my coffee mug. I look at my webcam, as if closing out a vlog. "And they all lived happily ever after?" I say to the empty room. "Well, most of them. Me, Gus, Sharon, the whole neighborhood, really. As for Brenda..." I lean in a little closer. I hear she's downsizing. Turns out $250,000 federal fines aren't covered by the HOA's annual budget. Who knew? I give a final, satisfied smile, take one more sip of coffee and get back to work. The silence is perfect. The internet is stable. And the world is exactly as it should be.